We good to go? James is just getting the YouTube started. We're good. Okay, so good evening. It's just gone 6 o'clock. Welcome everybody to the Place and Resources Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 26th of November 25. Apologies for absence.
Councillor Charlie Hasty.
Yeah, we have his. And we have
Councillor David Gaskell, Councillor Adrian Cartwright is substituting, and Councillor Caroline Phillips. Councillor Solis Hayes is substituting, Chair.
Thank you. Any others?
I'm not sure where Daniel is, Chair.
All right, well, we'll record his apologies then. The minutes of the last meeting have been circulated, pages 5 to 10 off the pack. Is there anything? Oh, apologies. Declarations of interest. Is there anything, Andy?
Through you, Chair, I was on the board of MPH at one time for the council, and that references item 6.
Yeah, but you're not now.
No.
Oh. Any other declarations of interest? Thank you. Chair's announcements. I don't have any formal announcements. Sorry, where am I at? Minutes. So the minutes have been circulated. Is there anything for accuracy on page 5, which starts with the minutes of the meeting and finishes with minutes of the meeting, point 24? Page 6, which starts Councillor Jonathan Harris and finishes with all they could to reduce costs. Page 7, which starts there had been an increase in costs and finishes with children in care across Northamptonshire. Page 8, which starts with disabled facilities grants and finishes with including events in community areas. And page 9, which starts the committee noted the informal meeting and finishes with the meeting closed at 7:45 p.m. We'll try and beat that tonight. So is it your wish then that I sign those a true record? Yep. Agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Thank you, James. So item 5, budget monitoring and budget setting update. And this is the WNC budget, not any commentary on the budget that we had this afternoon. James.
Thank you. What I'm suggest to do is take you through a verbal update on the period 7 position on a headline basis, and then that will then nicely flow into giving you an update in terms of where we are as regards to budget setting, as well as touching on the latest update on fair funding review, which I know everyone's keen to hear about. So just a note to say that obviously December Cabinet there will be a full and detailed period 7 monitoring report alongside the draft budget, but this just gives you a flavour of the headline position ahead of that meeting. Unfortunately, I'm not coming with good news. Where we are at the moment is from the period 6 position, we had service pressures of 14.7 million. We felt at that time that we could look to mitigate a material amount, circa £7.7 million of that amount through the use of additional funding. So that took the estimate from period 6 down from the 14.7 million to just under £8 million from a council-wide perspective, and including those opportunities, which we were fairly comfortable with, but not certain. Where we are is at period 7 is there's been an adverse movement of £1.8 million since that period 6 position. In summary, we've had an adverse movement in adult social care of £838,000. That's made up of a mix of issues. Some of the key items that relates to is an undeliverable demand management budget saving. Some additional adult social care demand, and then offset by client contributions to get to that figure. That's been offset in full by some underspends in community and opportunities, place and resources. So those underspends are broadly about £1.2 million in aggregate to more than offset that. However, we've had a material movement from the Children's Trust of £2.4 million, which is then, when you look at those in combination, has meant that we've moved by that £1.8 million. The adverse movement from the Children's Trust is in relation to a number of savings that they expect to deliver that now have turned red, and again some demand pressures there. So that takes the period 7 position to £16.5 million. We still feel that, although there's not certainty, we still feel that we can build in those additional government funding sources that we're still waiting for confirmation on, but we're fairly confident we'll get those in. So when you play in that government funding, that then takes us to where we thought we were last month of just under £8 million overspent to £10.5 million overspent now. I'll just pause there because I'm just conscious of throwing a lot of numbers at you all.
So on the 31st of March, at year end, we're expecting to be 10.5 million overspent.
Correct.
Okay. And the two big drivers as normal, children's and adults.
Correct.
Sally?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. This comes to the Children's Trust and how its debts are treated. As I understand it, the overspend at the end of the year can be capitalised, and therefore it can be managed. We don't have the ability to actually challenge their spend and to put a cap on their budget. That does mean that moving forward over the next few years, we're likely to face similar challenges with them, and therefore face exactly the same problem. I wonder what thought has been given to capitalising the debts, not just this year, but moving forward, so that everybody knows where they stand, and also if any other approaches have been made to government about being able to manage their spend more closely and cap their budgets in any way.
Can we capitalise it, James?
It was on.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, no, we're not able to capitalise the overspend. Unfortunately, it does come through the revenue account. So at the moment, we have a contractual arrangement where we have to pick up a set percentage of the costs, and then the North pick up the other percentage. So that goes for our revenue account. We can't capitalise that. I think the key thing for me is that it's the contract sum for the following year. So we go for a budget setting process. Hand in hand with that, the Children's Trust go for a contract sum process as well. And obviously the objective is that the contract sum that's agreed with all parties is deliverable in the following year, and that there isn't a need to overspend. But no, unfortunately, we've not been in that position because of the volatility of care. In terms of the interface between the Children's Trust and us, so as part of the contractual arrangements, the Children's Trust provide us monthly information. They provide us performance information that talks about how well and what their challenges are operationally. And there's a series of KPIs. And they also provide us financial information on a monthly basis, effectively a set of management accounts. And then both councils then review that information, have the opportunity to ask questions, review, challenge. But in terms of directing how the Children's Trust manages their operations. We're not able to do that because they are they're their own sovereign organisation. I was just saying to a colleague there, they're called a Children's Trust, but actually they're a company limited by guarantee, and they've got a statutory direction to manage the services themselves.
So you touched on the contract sum. I'm pretty sure that has to be agreed by the contract by the end of this month, which is Friday, to all intents and purposes. How's that going?
Yes, we'll have agreement by the deadline.
Fine. That's all we need to know at this stage. Jonathan? Sorry, do you want to come in, Andy? Yeah. Okay. Jonathan and then Andy, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. James, can I just clarify, you talked about a larger sum, but there are some mitigations in the mix. Are you able to elaborate on those mitigations? Because it sounded like they weren't necessarily entirely guaranteed, if I might interpret it that way.
Yeah. So we are, in terms of those mitigations, it's circa about £6 million. At the moment, we're looking at trend analysis, and we think there is potential for planning income to be over and above budgeted levels. So that is one of those things where we're not guaranteed because it's volatile, but we think there's a high chance that would bring in potentially another £500,000. There also is, when in terms of the flow of money through the business rates retention system of government, generally there is surplus every year in terms of the government, when the government does its calculations, that it overestimates in terms of what it needs to collect itself. And for the last X number of years now, we've retained a surplus of around about 400k. So we're relatively confident that we would get a similar level to that. And then we then have some more external funding from government with regards to waste, in terms of the work we do on waste. And we're quite confident in terms of that money will come in, and that the work we do means is what we're doing in waste is congruent with what government needs us to do for that money. So that's the three elements basically.
But that adds up to about £1 million?
So the additional planning income is 500k, forecast business rate surplus 400k, and waste funding 5 million.
Oh, 5 million, sorry, okay, all right.
Quick follow-up, if I may. Does that waste funding not come with requirements in terms of where it's allocated? So
it does, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, didn't we have a discussion around this at the beginning of the budget, around whether or not they could take some business as usual and fund it using that stream, and then release out some business as usual type funding that's been paid for centrally?
Yeah, it's called the extended producer responsibility, and it's effectively money that's passported from private enterprise on the back of their the waste that they produce.
We have Fiona in the room. She can tell us all about it. There's no need for us to talk rubbish about rubbish.
There is, so as James has said, it comes from producers of packaging, so plastic bottles, cardboard, and they pay into a government fund, and then that's redistributed to councils. We obviously just need to be cautious and make sure that we do meet the requirements of that funding.
Thank you. Any other questions for James? Andy, sorry.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. So that was 2.4 million overspend. Is that just for West Northants, or does that include Northants as well in that figure for the Children's Trust?
No, so the 2.4, that's the swing, that's the movement, that's the adverse movement from the previous month. So that
12.
takes the Children's Trust overspend from 11.1 million to 13.5 million. That's our share only. That's the West Northants share.
Yeah.
So if you couple that with the Northants, can you let us know what that figure is?
Yeah.
25?
25
Well,
million.
it's not quite double, but it'll be damn near it.
Okay. So when you said that you agree the contracts with them potentially on Friday, it means nothing really. By this time next year, it could be another 25, 30 million. Is that correct? Is that how I read it?
If the Children's Trust are not able to manage within their budget, then obviously, there will be an overspend to that.
Okay. So what plans are you going to put in place for that? Because obviously that's going to be a big issue for next time.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is in terms of it's called a contract sum negotiation. However, there is no point in terms of trying to game a negotiation, because if the risk basically comes back to us anyway in terms of finances. So the first objective is trying to working with them to develop a budget that is deliverable, getting their assurances on that the budget is deliverable, and having as much information as we can to understand, to enable that to be delivered. What do we as a key stakeholder need to do to contribute to that? Because not everything they do is just solely on them. We need to interface into some of their sort of preventative type of work as well. So there's been a lot of work with both directors of children's social care in terms of some of those interdependencies. And again, as part of that contract sum negotiation, it's been reviewing and challenging some of the savings proposals, having a view in terms of seeing whether it's reasonable in terms of some of their inflationary and demand calculations. So just a general review on the contract sum itself. However, it's from a contractual perspective rather than going in there and having all the data.
Sure.
But you are right.
Yes. I mean, and you are an internal, you just get in a circle, and, you know, all this cost saving from other departments, putting the money in to go to the Children's Trust, each budgetary year in the past has come up against it. And the assurances from the Children's Trust doesn't mean anything really, because your demand is outstripping it. Certainly. And there must be a better funding way of this through government, if I'm honest with you.
You're right. If you look at the history, it started off, I think, in 21 at around 85 million. Yeah. We don't know what the sum's going to be, but it'll be somewhere around 200 is my guess. That's what we've managed to get to in a few years.
I don't think it's
and each year we've met their contract sum, and they've come back for about another 20 million. So it's just we seem to be on this perpetual thing of last year was 180, we'll fix it to 200, 180, and we need another 200. Year before was 150, we fixed it to, and they needed another 20. Next year's 180, we fixed the 150 to 180, and then we need another 20, and it'll probably be 200, and this time next year we'll be saying, we need another 25. They just seem to be in this idea where we're actually hitting their budget is impossible. Frizana's waving at me violently, but...
Totally agree.
You did say I could...
I did say you could do, yes, that's fine, and I know this is a subject you know a little bit about.
Indeed. Okay, so the contract sum for this year was in the region of about 182, and then there was an increase of another 2-point-something million, and now the amount that is being sought is 206 million. I attended the Children's Trust meeting last time. So really the big issue here is about how the contractual arrangements are looked at in terms of having greater engagement and greater control, because at the moment, whatever additional amount is required, both local authorities are liable to simply pay that. So there is a discussion to be had, I think, with the DFE to explain and basically, if there is to be an improvement in the quality of services, which is where we had the problems initially, then how do we do that without funding to be able to address those issues? So we end up with a bit of a vicious circle. We end up with a scenario whereby additional funding is being sought and provided by us, but our ability then to improve provision is severely limited. So there's a need for a real radical rethink here, and we do need to do some further work with the Trust.
Yeah, well, and I think we should not try and do that now, but I rather suspect that when we get our budget and we want to look at areas for scrutiny, it's probably going to be one that would and could and should be top of the list. Because I agree with you, we just seem to be on this circle, and worse still, they're almost a debenture holder where they get first shout on the money, and then everybody else has to change their behaviour in order to keep funding. one or two services. Sorry, Sally. So before you come in, is there anybody else wants to speak? All right, Sally.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I got if I referred wrongly to capitalisation. Sorry, I referred wrongly to capitalisation last time. It may have been that it was from a briefing where it was identified how that overspend would be funded. And it was clear that it would be manageable this year, albeit obviously it's a pressure everyone could live without. However, until we get back control, if children's services are brought back in-house and the trust is dismantled, then unless anything gives, there's likely to be a similar sort of trajectory. It might be managed down, but it won't be substantially different because the social trends are very similar. Some of the purchasing might be changed, but the social trends are obviously similar. So it's about making sure that there's financing moving forward, that the trust can improve its service to the point where it can be dismantled, if that's what the council decides to do, and then the council can get back control of its own services, which is what will make it possible to get the change. So it's one, is there a strategy, a 3-year strategy to take us through to that? And secondly, also in the statement which the government released just recently, there was more information about funding for children's services, including for trusts. And does that give us any comfort in terms of dealing with our own trust?
Yeah, so I think the focus now on the Children's Trust is obviously getting ready for the inspection, which is the focus, and trying to get to good in terms of that inspection. And clearly it's no, that's what we want. That's absolutely what we want. I think in terms of the and I'll cover this briefly when we get to the budget as well. So there has been an announcement from government around about some more funding for children's social care. Usually that funding from children's social care usually comes with certain criteria, and it's generally around about transformation, and it's generally of a sort of short-term nature. So we'd need to understand in terms of what the requirements are for that grant to understand how we can best utilise it. But yeah, that will be helpful, and I'm sure there'll be discussions with Colin the North about how we best utilise that money once we're clear in terms of what our quantum is for WNC and what the rules are around it. And
practically, it will take about 2 to 3 years. With the inspection next year, it will then be about 18 months on from there before we could get it back in-house. Just in practical terms.
Yeah, it would. If that was a direction of travel that we was looking at, it would take a couple of years in terms of sort of notice periods and then sort of transitioning and whatever. So yeah, that seems realistic to me.
But the journey that they've been on for the last 5 years, for 6 years even, was to get the statutory direction lifted. So they have to get to a point where Ofsted are happy, give them a stamp of approval. We can't predetermine what decisions then could be made thereafter, because just like bringing MPH in-house, there will be no doubt a consultation and a plan and a whole load of other stuff to go through, and we need to make sure we can give quality assurances that we don't end up back in the same position we were in 2018, 17, 16, whenever, when the wheels came off the trolley. Sorry, Silas, you look like you want to say something, and then I want to move on.
Sure, thank you, Chair. In my world of aviation safety, nobody goes to work to do a bad job, okay? And when something happens that is either unthinkable or disastrous, you have to do a thorough investigation and get to the root cause. And I know I'm preaching to the converted in here, but there have been a few people who've spoken who've tried to understand what's gone wrong, and I haven't really heard anything as to how and why that's happened. So a proper investigation with root causes. But also, Ian, you're the one that's putting forwards ideas on in the world of planning that you need to have options. You need them to be properly considered. And again, I've heard a few people saying, what is it we're going to do? And I've not really heard anything back in terms of options. You can't really make any recommendations until you've finished that proper root cause investigation, but not really hearing, A, why are we in this situation, and B, what can we do about it?
Well, that was precisely why I was saying we might want to look at that deeper in scrutiny to get the actual people who can answer those questions in the room, because we're all sitting on the council side of the table, and on this particular one, our role is that of cash point.
Yeah, exactly.
We need to get the people to say, well, what have you done with the cash and where's it going? And I agree with you, and I'll ask those questions, but there's nobody here can do that other than, well, James will tell you he got an invoice for X and he's paid it, but that's it.
Well, it's slightly tongue-in-cheek, but if the people who are managing the money only take their wages once they have stayed within budget and they have enough money to pay themselves, I think you might see something changing.
Interesting idea. Sorry, yeah, quickly.
Just briefly, I think the other thing we need to factor in here is market forces. You and I have talked before many times about the rising costs, unbelievable costs of children's care in the private sector. And the Children's Trust is heavily reliant on the private sector as it currently stands, and it's an open market. So that's part of the equation. So I don't think it's quite as straightforward as saying you don't get your pay if you overspend, because they are trapped in a cycle, and that cycle externally is part of the problem and needs to be broken as much as anything else.
Yeah. But maybe when we get to budget scrutiny, I think it will be useful to put that on and start trying to get behind that. But I've tried it before. Sorry, anything else, James, you want to say on the budget, or budget setting then is the other half of the budget monitoring?
Yeah, thank you. Just to give you a broad position of where we are on budget setting. It's fair to say it doesn't get any busier in the finance department about this time of year, because this is where we're trying to pull everything together. So as a reminder, we need to bring a balanced draft budget to Cabinet in back end of December. And that's what we're working to do now. All I can say is there's been a phenomenal effort from everyone in the organisation in terms of managing the estimated deficit that we have for next year. Where we are now is we're in a position where we had a good session with senior officers in Cabinet yesterday, and we talked through all of those opportunities to be more efficient. And I think that was quite a sort of successful sort of internal session there. We're not quite there yet at the moment. The biggest variable, as I'm sure you'll all be aware, is the impact on fair funding. So at the moment, we are still working on 3 scenarios in terms of what fair funding can mean to us. Those 3 scenarios range from additional income of 10, 15, 20 million pounds between. So clearly that is a huge range that we need to narrow down. We had on the back of government's announcements last week, we had one of the financial advisors provide a briefing to all the councils that use its services on Friday afternoon. And to give you an extent of how many councils use this advisor, I think there was about 280 different councils on the call on Friday afternoon, trying to understand what it all means for them. And I think it's fair to say that this advisor that spends their full time working on this government announcement, although they're a little bit closer to being able to be confident in terms of what the numbers are for us, they're still not there even just now. There was some updated information from government around about some of the details of the funding announcement. I think from our perspective, it probably wasn't helpful for us in terms of some of the movements from government. So one of the changes in the formula was there was less financial recognition for children's social care. So where there was an assumption they will get a certain amount of money on the back of our pressures from children's social care, which we've just talked about. It looks like now that's not going to be quite as much as we was hoping for. They're also is they've also updated some indices, which I think is absolutely fair and spot on. So on the last announcement, they've now had the opportunity to look at more updated population and deprivation stats. So I think that's probably a positive in terms of getting more up-to-date information. However, what they've now introduced is they've introduced a recovery grant into the mix. This is new, and I think it's a recovery grant that we currently don't receive at the moment. A number of councils do, and the fear for us is that this recovery grant being continued means that it would need to be funded through the overall pot and actually equalises some of the benefits that we were hoping and gets redistributed by government via this means, and almost sort of takes away some of the detailed impacts of the indices through a different means. The initial headlines looks like then that will be then putting more money back into inner city London's who were basically who were the worst case hit from where it was looking like it's going to go. So it looks like it's equalising some of those potential gains from us from a level. Another complication as well is why it's not quite straightforward is the government have introduced a new set of grants, up to £1 billion of grants each year. But sometimes when you hear new grants, it isn't always brand new. Sometimes it's about recent grants. Sometimes they are new grants, but sometimes there's new burdens. And then sometimes they are new grants, and then sometimes there's quite heavy strings attached, requirements on those. So that's in the mix as well, and we need to untangle that, because the last thing we want to do is think we've got more money from these grants, and then we realise, oh, actually, it either relates to something that money we're already expecting, or it relates to something where we have a new spending commitment. So at the moment, that's still being worked up from the advisor level. And we are hoping that in the next few days we'll get a financial model that we can rely a little bit more on and effectively narrow that gap we've got at the moment. But it's incredibly challenging. From a budget perspective, so on those we've got a best case scenario, likely case scenario, and a worst case scenario. On the best case scenario, if the funding comes through, I think we're there or thereabouts on the budget in terms of getting a balanced budget. I think if it's medium or worst case, then we've still got a bit of work to do in terms of developing more proposals, and if that's the case, then I think it's...
So sorry, if I'm listening to you correctly, your best case scenarios is we get 20 million of extra cash. If that comes in, you're back to zero. So each of the other 3 or 5 million different. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct, yeah.
Right, so the medium case scenario, we're still 5 million under, and the worst case, we're 10 million under.
It's around about that sort of figures, yeah.
Okay. And on fair funding, will the final settlement, so to speak, be when we get presumably the next announcement, which we're expecting 18th, 19th of December? Yeah. Is that right? So that's right.
I think it's always. I think even the best endeavours of our advisor, it's still going to be.
But these are all just reading tea leaves and trying to interpret and reinterpret almost smoke signals coming out of government, and put a number around them, and government then doing what government does, rewarding its friends and punishing its enemies. Sally?
Thank you. There's a couple of items. One is obviously there's the usual floors and ceilings when they do a switch in government grant. Are you saying that what goes back to London is separate from the floors and ceilings? Because when I read through the thing, they were very clear about obviously there's a floors and ceilings process. The second thing is that there was also a reference to the change in calculation, which happened on the council tax income from new build and new homes. And I have to say, I read it through a couple of times and then I moved on because I couldn't work out what the implications would be for us. And I wonder if you could say what the implications would be for us. And the third thing was that on the detailed data about the disadvantage in different areas. And I know there's a lot being said about North getting more money because of the entrenched disadvantage in Wellingborough, Kettering and Corby. But looking at the stats for Northampton, they were actually quite shocking. There were probably more areas that were disadvantaged than in the other areas. And some of them were as acute. In fact, you know, in my own area, there was one that was as acute as anything anywhere. And I just wondered if there's any potential for going back and having a re-examination of that data, because I think that West Northamptonshire and Northampton in particular has been completely underestimated on the level of disadvantage, particularly taking in mind the proximity of a large number of areas of high disadvantage, which are all close to each other, all in one urban area.
Yeah, so I'm not able to go into the sort of the real detail in terms of what each of those metrics sort of mean for WNC, because there are many.
Yeah.
There are many metrics and indices, but you know that's currently what the team are currently working on at the moment in terms of trying to pull the model apart, basically. But in terms of the floors and ceilings, no, there still will be floors and ceilings and protection over I think it's a three-year period, so that nobody is disadvantaged too heavily over that period of time, which is the right thing to do. So that still remains in terms of that. I'm just talking in terms of overall bottom line perspective compared to what we'd assumed in our plan as well.
And the new housing.
That'll be one measure. I don't think that'll be too material in terms of the grand scheme of things. But I'm happy once I've got clarity on that. I'm happy to come back to you and give you a sort of written response.
Right. So I think. Anybody else want to say anything? But I think in summary what you're saying is until we know from government, it's all guesswork, but at the moment we're guessing. Yes. We're hoping for the best, but we're somewhere probably between 0 and 5 million on a realistic assessment yet to find. Yeah,
and I think, you know, I am hopeful that basically on the next, because we get a number of iterations on this model, and it's one I'm always conscious about quoting a specific figure, because every time we get an iteration, the numbers change. And as I said before, it only takes a small adjustment on a national level to make a huge change for us. So I wouldn't be in a position to quote numbers now, but I'm hoping now we're getting to the point now where we're going to get the best information we can do from an advisor, and that's where we have to then pitch ourselves.
All right. Well, I want to move on, if everyone's happy with that, to the regeneration and asset management. So pages 11 to 20 on the report. Kevin, are you introducing this?
Yep, happy to. So the report's been shared. We're going to update on housing delivery, the background to why housing delivery is now the responsibility of the council, national local policy context, delivery figures, and then come on to what we're doing around housing delivery now and what we're moving forwards in terms of increasing that. So obviously the report sets out obviously the decisions that were taken by Cabinet in June 24, and particularly November 24 and June 25 over moving council housing delivery back in following the large housing sites that were unfortunately not able to be delivered due to rising costs by Northamptonshire Partnership for Homes. The national context is that there's a really strong will, both locally and nationally, and it's a key priority to deliver more affordable housing, social housing particularly, with the national target there, 1.5 million homes for social and affordable homes over the government's period. They've made significant steps in terms of aiding the delivery of those housing as well, including the SHAP programme, Social and Affordable Homes programme, of £39 billion, which is critical to enabling that delivery, and also some really good reforms around right to buy as well, which helps our own housing revenue account position and the viability of our own housing. In terms of our local ambition and need, we've got a affordable homes delivery plan that we brought forward, which sets out our targets of where we need to get to. And that gives our targets of 650 homes per year with a stretch target of 750 homes per year by 2029. In terms of where we are and what we've been delivering, so recently, over from 2021 to 2024, the report sets out that we've actually delivering not far off where we need to get to 598 homes per year. However, we're not delivering the right type of homes that we need to meet our need. So most of these have been shared ownership or affordable rent, with 40% being shared ownership and 42% being affordable rent, with only 81 a year being social rent. Then also, most of these homes are delivered through Section 106. So what we have is really strong market delivery of housing, which then drives to Section 106. But RP is delivering a lot less, at only 166 homes per year, and the council only delivering 89 homes per year. So it's the balance as well is something that needs to be considered and looked at, and something we're looking at moving forwards. The HENA target is much greater than that. Now, that is a theoretical planning target of where we need to get to, but that sets a much higher target of where we need to get to, and we've used that number really to help base our affordable homes delivery plan number around the 650 to 750. So of our need, we have just over 2,000 live applications. We've got 1,000 homes that we're unable to meet the need of at the moment. 50% of those are on Band A, and 800 people in temporary accommodation. Now, most of those need social rent, not the affordable rent or the shared ownership that we've been seeing the delivery of. So, and that's really the big shift in what we're going to look to change when we're moving forwards. So what we've been delivering since taking it back in is we've completed the schemes that we've inherited from MPH, 24 units at Castle Street, and the new Southbridge schemes as well of 28 units. 24 at Castle Street. And then we've also brought forward a garage site scheme, which will be completed in March 26 of 18 units. Broadmead Court for the SHAP programme there of 20 units for homelessness provision. Buckton Fields, recent cabinet, 36 units for social rent and 7 in there for temporary accommodation. Holston Road, 82 new homes, with about a third of those being for social rent, again hitting those highest need categories. Then Ecton Brook, which we start in early next year, again 18 units, but again heavily social rent as well, so really hitting the ones where we need to. And we're just then working through the roof garden scheme that we inherited from MPH to look at how we can make that into a viable scheme that, again, that maximises that social rent provision that we're looking to bring forwards. So we've took other steps as well, such as establishing a housing delivery board, and that brings partners from the private sector, public sector, RPs, architects, looking at design quality, build quality, numbers, Homes England are on there as well, to bring a board together to challenge and look at how we can address not just our own delivery of what we're looking towards and increase that number from 89 that's delivering the HRA to a number of around 150, but also how can we work with a market to get them to deliver more as well? How can we build those better relationships? And I think some of the schemes that I've just mentioned in terms of Holston, Buckton, is a demonstration of really us intervening and working in partnership with developers to bring schemes forward where they weren't previously. And I think that's where we'll see some of our biggest gains as well, where people can build for cheaper than we can on larger schemes that are complex and they've got the experience to do so. We should be using that. Then we're also bringing forward an affordable housing delivery framework that we'll bring to Cabinet next year. This will set out some of the parameters that we'll be working within in terms of where affordability needs to sit for us, how we're going to work with those partners to bring forward more homes, and setting out some of these targets in more detail, really. We've been successful recently in securing £300,000 from Homes England in the Council House Building Support Fund. There was a maximum allocation there, 300,000, which we secured the full amount of. And so we'll be using that until the end of March 31st this financial year to bring in extra capacity and support and do feasibility work to help us with that future pipeline as well, in terms of helping us to drive through and boost further numbers there, with feasibility studies already underway on some of those sites. And then, so funding of future opportunities, we're going to look to maximise that 39 billion from Homes England under the Social and Affordable Homes Delivery Plan. Their aspiration is to get 60% of that social rent, and the grant allocations will be higher than what they previously were under the previous regime, which is really positive as well. And so we're liaising closely with Homes England as well on that programme, and to recover and rebuild some of the relationships from the schemes that didn't happen last time. The council are going to bid early for our continuous market engagement as part of that process, and long term we're going to look to have a strategic settlement as a strategic partner, to get and aiming to get a one-off settlement for a range of schemes as we get that development in the pipeline further firmed up. Delivery is in a challenging position since picking it up, but we're taking key steps to make sure it's improving, looking at a range of measures, both within Section 106 RPs and ourselves, and us working in partnership with other developers to look at how we can really leverage and build on the programme as much as possible to get us to where we want to be, which is a much greater number than we've ever delivered previously. But we think that's where we need to be for a place that's of the scale and has the need as West Northamptonshire does.
Okay, thank you. So when we're delivering from the developer side, you said they're mostly bringing forward affordable rent and shared ownership. Is there anything we should be doing in the 106 agreement to actually put in different tenures, or do they have control over that? How
we have some influence on that in terms of what we ask for through planning. However, the biggest tool probably for that is going to be through the Social and Affordable Homes programme that Homes England use to give grant through. So as 60% is funded from that now, it's that needs to be social rent. That will have a large driver on what they're looking to deliver there.
And then how many do we lose because of viability reviews?
We only achieve circa 12%, don't we, across West Northamptonshire as the numbers that come through through planning applications to Section 106. Each of those is assessed individually and looked at. Obviously, different sites have different challenges. What I would say is that West Northamptonshire does deliver a really strong number of homes, and there is a balance alongside this, that if land value is the challenge in all of this, and if landowners weren't achieving the higher level of social rent that you're putting in there, the lower the land values, and then that land might sit there for longer periods of time and overall delivery is lower. And if you're achieving...
Yeah, but my question is how many between a grant of planning permission to say we'll do 40%, which becomes 12, how many are we losing?
I'd have to come back to you on those numbers.
Okay. Sally?
Thank you. Yeah, I completely agree with you that the main area of need is going to be social rent in terms of what the council actually provides, because of the cost of living pressures and the extraordinary need for social housing. What is something like 2,000 or so on the waiting list, which is extraordinarily high. And I know, Chair, that we all share concerns about what happened, about the projects that didn't happen. But I think that moving forward, we've got to look at how we actually provide the housing rather than just look at what went wrong in the past. One of the things that concerns me is that quite shortly we're likely to have all the Northampton Partnership Homes stuff come fully back into the council's domain, so to speak. And the figures, the cost implications just of the decent homes and the cladding and AWAB's law over the 5-year frame that you've got for your HRA capital spend, the amount that will cost will be roughly the same as the council's borrowing actually for HRA spend. I've been through the figures with Jane Carr and with Councillor Hastie. I've agreed to keep them confidential, but they're roughly of that magnitude. So I think my question is, it would be really helpful to see a pipeline for the provision of that social housing, which includes the funding streams, which, as you rightly say, some will have to come from Homes England, some may well come from external development partners, and some from council funding, but bearing in mind that there's a huge trade-off between being able to stop some of the council's existing social rented stock from slipping into complete disrepair and being able to provide new build. And that is going to be a really difficult thing to manage. And I certainly think that if we can't manage to get a significant make significant inroads into the waiting list, I think there's got to be a really clear pitch made to government about the need for extra capital for housing, because the crisis that's coming down the road, certainly in Northampton, is horrendous. Not just in terms of having to deal with housing, which is in my view, is just in a complete state of disrepair, but also in terms of the different property sizes that are needed for families of different sizes, and being clear that we can provide people with housing, but also with housing of a decent standard. And that is going to be difficult. And I just think, Chair, that we need to be very clear about what the trade-offs are between the two, and also what the cost implications are, because AWAB's law, cladding, and Decent Homes 1, then we've got Decent Homes 2 coming, are huge pressures on the capital budgets.
This is always an issue that we have, where central government just layer on responsibilities and burdens to local government and they don't fund them. Andy, and then Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. I know that a lot of these I'm all in favour of houses. We need more houses, and we need to build as many houses as we can. I noticed on the report there's lots of, it's Northampton heavy on the housing. Is there part of the plan that actually builds houses more in the rural areas? And obviously this will help the infrastructure as well. So are there people in the rurals that need housing as well? Or is it down to the fact that the land values will be more expensive in the rural areas than in Northampton? Does that come into play?
So what we want to do is build the right houses where the greatest need is. So what we see is that the greatest need for social and affordable homes is within urban areas where they've got existing links and connections. However, there are elements across West Northamptonshire. So you'll have seen we recently acquired 8 units in Brackley, and which we'll have as part of our management arrangements. We're looking at sites across West Northamptonshire, including the former Daventry area and including the former South Northampton area as well. So all of those sites we've looked at. There's a management element to be looked at alongside this, and I think that comes back to Sally's point before in terms of MPH currently is separately, and obviously it's coming in-house, but as things come in, actually I think there's a greater ability to have closer working relationships there between the teams to say, look, actually, how can we cluster some of these bits up around different areas where there is of a need? Because we know Daventry has clear needs. We know there are needs around the rural areas as well. And how do we manage those stocks? Is it best that we manage them, or it's best that we work with partners like Futures and Grand Union, where they've got existing stock there, and we work with those partners that can then service them better, because we don't want the cost of getting the vans out there and everything else when it's hard. So it's managing things in the best way. But we're looking at with the sites we've got, and I can't name them all because obviously it's we're working through the feasibility process at the moment, but we've got sites across West Northamptonshire that we're keen to deliver, and we're working closely with the housing strategy team where there's clear needs to deliver units really. Yeah.
So yeah.
Thank you, Chair, for your indulgence. I mean, 8 units isn't really cutting it, is it, Kevin? We need a lot more than 8 units in the rurals. We need hundreds as well. So I'm just very, very conscious of what you've just said. You're just basing it really around Northampton, and really you need to broader picture and do lots more in the rurals because of the infrastructure and everything that entails.
Okay, Jonathan. and then Cam.
Yeah, thank
and then
you,
Stuart.
Chair. A couple of questions, if I may. Right to buy, what's the current status? Because right to buy was suspended for a period of time, I believe. Is that still the case? Because my second point related to that is what are we currently losing through that process of right to buy? Are we keeping up? You know, are we building quick enough effectively? So that's the first question. The second question is, I seem to remember that we also allocated, I'm looking to Stuart for this, a 20 million fund to look at buying existing properties rather than just relying on new build, because this seems very focused on new build. And obviously the quickest way potentially to add to our stock is to purchase houses that already exist in various locations of the right nature and right type. So a couple of points there, if I may, Kevin. I don't know if you can answer those.
Yeah, I can answer those, yeah. So in terms of right to buy, the right to buy legislation was changed to make it to increase the to make it more difficult to increase the parameters of that people had to do to get to be right to buy in terms of the length of time they had to be there, and also the amount of discount that they received from there. So that led to an initial spike in right to buy applications because people were trying to get through before the deadline. So we've seen a significant increase in the number of applications that have came through. I know the number of applications was circa 400. I'm not sure of those how many went through exactly. I'd have to get the latest numbers on that. But we saw a big spike in the number of applications that came through. But then our trajectory, rather than within our model, we had 120 homes per year being lost through right to buy. We've reduced that now to sort of circa 70. So it's in a much better position for us. Now, within the HRA, we need a number of homes within the HRA for it to be sustainable, to cover the, obviously, management costs and other costs that it has anyway. So with that number being lower, it means that, you know, we don't have to drive as hard, although now we've got to get over that bump that we had within there to get back to it. But the overall changes are really positive in terms of the HRA and its future viability.
And how much of those capital receipts can we keep?
In terms of one for one, I need to check on that. But yeah, we retain the same amounts that we were retaining previously in terms of percentage that we move forward with. Yeah, so we will have a pot of right to buy receipts, and the time we've got to spend the right to buy receipts has increased from 5 years to 10 years. And previously we couldn't use right to buy receipts alongside Homes England grants. Well, they've increased flexibility of that as well. So now we can use both right to buy and Homes England grant on schemes where we need to bridge viability as well. So that has happened.
Okay.
In terms of acquisitions, we still have an active acquisition programme. That works alongside our new build programme. Obviously buying stock for acquisitions means that they can often have some of the issues and challenges that our existing stock does, which leads to those asset management issues which Sally was touching on. So new build should be part of that answer in terms of building up to the highest current building regulation standards in terms of quality, neighbourhoods and social behaviour and all those other factors, as well as being able to, you know, have greater control over where we're putting those communities where there is the greatest need, whether that's in the villages or whether that's in the towns or near those existing communities, really.
So I think Jonathan's question was, we had a pot of 20 million, how much is left or how much has been spent?
And again, I'd have to come back to you on the specifics of that number as well.
Okay. Cam and then Stuart.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, you know, it's more thoughts are given where we're actually building these big developments. I can't agree with the notion that we need to push more building into the sort of rural areas, because every village has its limitations, and then it puts a lot of pressure on the existing infrastructure. So I think we have to be very careful with that, and I'm glad to hear that this is actually being considered very carefully. But I just wanted to make that.
Thank you, Chair. So are you saying it's all right to build in Northampton but not in the villages? Because that's how it's just come across to me.
I'm not saying that it should be built into Northampton, but I'm saying that the very careful consideration needs to be given rather than simple sort of let's push it into the rural area versus cities or towns. So it has to be really carefully considered. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, we're not going to write the local plan now. Sorry, Stuart.
No, I was going to make the local plan point, Ian, is those two challenges, if you like, will be taken into account in the consultation that'll be out in the new year in terms of size, scale and the right development in the right place that takes an appreciation of all the things that have been said. In terms of the 20 million, again, Jonathan, I think that pot was for children's to help with the... I'll double check with that, but the £20 million pot was, I think, specifically for looking at helping with the children's, the issues we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I think we had a couple of £20 million pots. I remember when there was that headline that said about our borrowing had gone up by 100 million, and I texted something to John that said, I think there's 20 million here and 20 million there and 20 million somewhere else, and suddenly you're talking real money. So.
We'll absolutely clarify that point. Okay, indeed, we'll clarify. Thank you.
Yes, Sally.
Just to reiterate the point that of the 281 million HRA capital programme over the sort of 5-year onward. Oh, sorry. Okay, apologies. Of the 281 million HRA capital programme over the 5-year sort of window, only in fact 85 million of it is for new building, and 31 million of it, I think this is Jonathan's point, is for buybacks and spot purchases, and all the rest of it really goes on improvements and stuff. And I mean that's where I think the balance comes in, and where we need to see the sort of how the pipeline leverages in extra value and lets us increase the number of homes that are being built or are being acquired, and that's just a huge challenge. But it'd be really helpful to have those figures and perhaps to see them at a future, when possible. But that's what the latest monitor to cabinet showed.
Yeah. Anybody else on this one? So, what's the single biggest impediment to delivery? Is it planning? Is it cash? Is it combination?
In terms of council housing delivery, it's land and control. But overall, then I think it's the same pressure that the whole market's experienced, which is viability, really. I mean, I think there's big pressures on cost at the moment, and that'll be the planning challenges in terms of the viabilities coming through. And it's the same pressures on when we look to acquire land somewhere else to bring our own schemes forward. It's that wider whole system seems to be very constrained at the moment. The cost seems very high.
Yeah, but I think viability is a game, though. You get promised 40%, the package then gets sold on, it suddenly becomes 12 because of viability. We need to get to a point, if you're going to reform planning, to say, you promised us 40%. If it's one house less, the answer is no. And, because it's just a game. And unfortunately, the people who lose out are the people who need it most. No. Right, anything else on this particular one? I think we'll be quite interested to see the MPH delivery plan once that comes through. Once we've got that, or what the former MPH delivery plan might look like. I'm not going back over the old ground about the aborted starts and whatever. That's in the past, but it will be useful to begin to see then improvement of things coming through. So we shall move on then to section 106 agreements and community infrastructure review. Now, a new updated terms of reference, sort of scrutiny proposal on page 21 has been circulated. Are there any comments on that? So we've spent a bit of time on this last time round and said we would come back with a clearer set of terms of engagement as to what we wanted to do. So this is the next set of drafts and ideas as to where we're going. Is there any comments on that? So silence acceptance? Okay, good. So, Silas.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look for similarities between the form that I'm looking at and the risk-based approach that we put forwards.
Are you struggling to find them?
What I'm looking
Well, get to the point if that's what you're saying.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm looking at it and I'm not seeing the
Now,
similarities.
this is actually the old form. Sorry, James. I recognise it as the old form, but yeah, I take your point.
So through you, Chair, the principal purpose of the risk-based approach was to deal with a situation where Scrutiny had a number of topics that were in its work programme and it needed to decide between them. As things stand, this is a proposal for a scrutiny review.
Right, okay. Yeah, okay. So my next question is around, are we going to do this as a subgroup or are we going to do it as a whole committee group? James?
I think, Chair, I draw a distinction between possibly a subgroup involving the whole committee.
Well, yeah.
If you sought to do this work,
I don't suggest we do it as a committee agenda item. I mean, we either meet and take it as a piece of work, but are we going to do it, all of us, or is some of us just going to say a working group of 6 or whatever is better and bring the ideas back? Either approach is fine by me, but
I think certainly, Chair, if you sought to do this through the full committee, you would be making a rod for your own back, because you would be keeping all the disadvantages of a formal meeting with none of the advantages of a working group. And again, if you made it a subgroup involving all committee members, then there might be issues around how that might get a bit unwieldy and whether you'd lose something in terms of flexibility.
okay. Stuart?
Just to help the conversation, I think, or my suggestion was there's around 4 sessions to break it down into the individual parts to make sure we've got the right data, the right input, the right conversations, etc. So again, if members are happy with less than that, we're more than happy to facilitate whatever. But I think it's helpful to know about your commitment to it if you knew how many sessions it we're probably looking at. But it's probably 3 or 4 sessions, I would suggest, to really pull it apart, put it back together, and to add value to the process. And I think that's what members have asked us to do, is really give you that opportunity to really drive into the heart of the issues and come up with some top suggestions of what it looks like going forward. Again,
right.
just
So,
as a help.
Fine, I appreciate that. So are we going to set up a working group from this committee? Sorry, Jonathan?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that a working group probably does seem better. It potentially also gives us wider resources to tap into. It doesn't have to be necessarily people sat around this table as part of this committee, so that's another benefit. And obviously, in the terms of reference, it makes comment about councillor contributions, but it also references parishes.
Yeah, I was going to come on to that.
Group, you have that opportunity to engage with some parishes that maybe have been involved in this type of activity potentially before.
And I certainly, just to expand that, I certainly had correspondence with Danny Moody, and one of the things I said to him was that if we approve something, he or NCALC might want to come along and give their perspective, because Danny was concerned about our understanding of the parish council's understanding of 106, and he thought it was greater than what we might have accredited them with.
Yeah.
So, and I just think it was maybe not worded in the way that we meant, was that members were being asked by their parishes what it was, and it was difficult to get that information back, as opposed to saying, all the parish councils don't know how to spell S106.
Yeah.
Which was certainly not.
And there will be some that will be more familiar with it than others, that's for sure. But we also have a live consultation on this at the moment, don't we? Which closes on the 21st as a wider consultation. That's correct, isn't it, on Section 106? And
that's on the developer contributions element of this. And again, part of what I imagine the scrutiny would want to do is look at the consultation results and review that going forward. We are doing work with Danny and Anne Calc at the moment. We've got 4 volunteers from the towns and parishes who have already identified they'd like to get involved in something we were already setting up almost in parallel to this, but I take this chair's suggestion of if there's an opportunity to bring all members together to get that understanding of both tiers, if you like, then that might, well, again, it's your decision. But
certainly when I go to my parishes, they've probably only got 2 or 3 questions: is how much have we got, how do we get our hands on it, and what can we spend it on? Because some of them have got conditions on, and some of them are well aware of those. And some of them are saying, well, any update on the fact it's got parked somewhere or can't get out the door, which is frustrating. But again, we don't need to do the work now. We can do the work later. And on the 106 policy, I was wondering if we give a comment on that. I was hoping that maybe as a committee we might have wanted to take a view on that. That was currently being consulted upon, because I certainly have issues with it, on the basis that I don't think some of the issues that we've had are being addressed. We're not learning any lessons from past issues with 106, and we're trotting out the same lines in the new proposed policy, which doesn't seem to make any sense to me. Well, we can pick that up again, and hopefully that'll come through in the consultation. So are we saying we are going to set up a group? I don't see anybody enthusiastically wanting to join it, mind, but I need to stir up apathy here. Well, if we set up a group of sorry, Sally, yeah.
I was going to just propose that we set one up and then ask for volunteers, and if you've got a maximum size, then...
I was going to say the same. Well,
and set a deadline for when.
We'll set a deadline, and if not, we'll just get hold of the business managers and tell them to volunteer people for us, please. Well, shall we loosely say 6-ish? But I don't mind if 6 becomes 8 or 5. But
an odd number is usually helpful, Chair.
You won't find anyone more odd than me. I don't know. He's calling me odd. I don't mind.
Well, being risk averse, it avoids a scenario in which you've got an exactly equal split on a matter to be decided.
Yeah. But having said that, it comes back. It shouldn't be vote based, should it?
Yeah,
it's coming back to a committee. So
I wouldn't think so. But anyway, yeah, we can have an odd number between 6 and 8. Does it have to be a prime? No, okay.
If the committee was strongly supportive of a working group of 6, then it would be entirely in your decision.
Look, if we have 6 people and there's somebody comes rushing in the door and says, I desperately want to sit on this, I'm not going to stop them, irrespective of person, party or whatever. We can get maybe a bit more enthusiasm than I'm managing to drum me up here at the moment. So, so yeah, if there are people, because there may well be people on the planning committees that don't sit here that might have a greater interest in Section 106 matters. So certainly, maybe, James, after this, we send an email out in my name to all members asking for volunteers, but probably also maybe go fishing in the planning committee pool of members, because they're much more au fait with 106 matters on a practical basis, but my concern is much more about those questions that we get asked from parishes. How much have we got? Where is it? How do we get our hands on it? What are the conditions attached?
And through you, Chair, it certainly sounds like what the committee is talking about is what the overview and scrutiny framework calls an in-depth scrutiny review. So the offer was made of around 4 meetings. Add, at least one on the end of that to look at a final report and running those across. So you're looking at about the same number of months as the number of meetings involved.
Yeah, I think you're right. And we'll probably factor in the budget scrutiny as well. We're probably easy going to run to May, I would think, if not overstepping that, because I don't think we're going to get much done this side of Christmas. And then once we get into budget, we won't have the time because we just...
Consultation closes the 21st
of December. Yeah.
Plan in the new year, but again, this runs in parallel with that, so
right.
It's fine. Yeah.
But
I was just going to make the offer, Chair, of working with James to make sure that we've got a mix of rural, urban, etc., looking at the political side as well.
Yeah.
So again, more than happy to work.
I'm sure that will take care of itself.
Perfect, in which case, as I say, I'm more than happy to assist James with that.
Okay, thank you. Anything else to be said on that? Okay, thank you.
Just the point about a deadline for nominations.
Yeah. Can we say end of next week? Which is the 5th, is it? Is it the 5th of December?
5th of December.
Yes. Yeah. We happy with that? Yeah. It'll probably take a bit of time we get emails sent and that sorted out. Okay, so waste cleansing review, this is just a verbal update. I know we had a meeting the other night.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, we had our third meeting of the task group on Monday. Definitely Monday, yeah. And a couple of the members were in the room tonight. We've previously given Scrutiny Committee an update from the first meeting, which I couldn't make, and we shared the draft terms of reference. The second meeting focused on street cleansing, where we were joined by an independent consultant who's been reviewing the service and we currently offer, and came up with some key points for discussion, which included improving the planning of services, including optimising routes and resources across West Northants. So when we bring the whole area together, obviously we'll gain by route planning. The zoning of locations, we ensure the services are appropriate to that location. Obviously there's different standards from obviously the town centres to, as you work out of the town centres going to rural areas. Ring fence resources for cleansing and better continuity. At the moment, they're seeing that when there's shortages of staff and crew, the cleansing side of the contracts the staff are taking off that to go on to the waste collection side of it. So they think it should be ring fenced. Increased resources for graffiti removal. We can all see that as we come into our town. With standard approach across West Northants, improve inspection and supervision to ensure work complete to a good standard. There was quite a bit of discussion, as you remember, about lack of supervision because there's no point having standards if you're not actually checking the standards. Increase education and behavioural change through campaigns and social media about, obviously, because of the graffiti, and fly tipping is a scourge of where we live, unfortunately. The third meeting, what we had on Monday, was focusing more on waste collections, which is a big part of the resources. We're joined by the same consultancy. The meeting, a large part of the discussion was around the frequency of collection. So obviously if you live in the Daventry area or you represent one of the Daventry wards, you have a free weekly service at the moment, and which has worked quite well since 2019, was it? 18, yeah. So obviously we want to harmonise the whole services across the whole of West Northamptonshire, so the majority of the residents, apart from obviously terrace properties, will get the same service. So there was obviously quite a lot of discussions about moving pros and cons, about staying from 2 and moving or coming to 3 weekly.
So I think it's important to point out here, it's 3 weekly on the black bin, the residual waste only, because I don't want people thinking they're only going to see a bin lorry once every 3 weeks. It's just the black bin in Daventry that's picked up on a 3 weekly cycle.
There'll be a service every week, but it mainly obviously the black bin residual waste will be collected 3 weekly. Raised some concerns about some materials and in the waste stream which make 3 weekly collections difficult. Asked officers to explore options about absorbent hygiene products. Obviously there might be some kickback from public about obviously people who have babies with nappies, and obviously the officers came back to us and said obviously certain large families can have an extra bin, stuff like that, so they're going to that. Asked about how risk of off-takers can manage to ensure materials went to reputable treatment outlets. So obviously at the moment we are assured where our effluent goes to, but obviously we want to make sure going forward that all our waste goes to reputable companies and it's dealt with in a reputable way, so it doesn't end up abroad, wherever. Asked officers to ensure the finance are involved, to help us compare the benefits from leasing vehicles to purchasing vehicles. Obviously the two areas, the Norse contract which covers Daventry and the Veolia contracts, the vehicles will need to be replaced when the new contract starts because they're coming to their end of life. They have a 10-year life and they're on the 8 years now. Obviously the in-house, which is South, that has been more of a rolling contract, so they have got new vehicles, so they will all have to be replaced. Our fourth meeting will discuss delivery of these services, considering where we bring them in-house, whether we or the council delivers them directly, or whether we deliver them from an external contractor, or whether it's a joint venture like Norse at the moment. So yeah, we're still working at. Obviously, we hope to get the paper to cabinet early in the new year.
Thank you. Any questions to Nigel or Fiona? Yeah, we're just working our way through various bits and pieces. Yeah.
Councillor Kilburn.
Andy.
Through you, Chair. You touched on graffiti, and there's definitely been a big explosion of it around the town centre, tagging and such like. And you see it, I mean, what is the plan now? When obviously the bin men go around, emptying the bins and all that sort of. Do they not report graffiti? Or is it out of hand that you can't get around there to get cleaned off and you wait for the reports to go into the members to say, can you clean it? And what are we doing to stop the taggers from leaving their marks on there? Is it a policing issue? Is it, what is it? You touched on education, but looking at some of the graphics, I don't think that's...
No, obviously some are better than others, aren't they? Obviously there's a big smiley face going around everywhere at the moment.
And it's literally everywhere.
Yeah, I believe, personally I think we're trying to deal with a backlog of graffiti, as in, I think maybe the previous administration didn't really take it as serious as I'm taking it. And then it sort of, once you let that horse out of the stable, we're trying to shut the stable door, but the horse has actually ran the race and it's on its way back at the moment, do you know what I mean? So it's, it's obviously a big issue at the moment, and it's obviously this trend at the moment with youngsters, graffiti, and whether it's, some people think it's to do with, drug crime as well, gangs within the areas, or whether it's, because it's sort of copied the tags going up and down streets, and then you see it in a different area, the same tag. But yeah, it's down to policing. I actually brought it up with the Police and Crime Commissioner, a residents' meeting, where we were there, and actually she actually, I was astonished by her. She actually said, "Oh, it's a council issue." So I did have to remind her actually it's criminal damage. Right. And then obviously her sergeant reminded her of it was the criminal damage, and I asked Wood. Obviously, it happens. You know, he's like ninjas, aren't they? They come out at night. You know, they've done where I live again. You know, you drive past at 1 in the morning, it's not there. Come out at 6 in the morning, it's there. So they are like ninjas. And obviously, most of the people driving around at that time are police officers. So I did ask, what would she expect of her police officers if they saw somebody tagging? So actually the sergeant who reminded her of that is actually criminal damage, that he would expect his officers to deal with it, and he wouldn't expect them to walk past, drive past, or just not bother with it. As regard to reporting, it's not the contractor's job at the moment, you know, as in the waste contractors to waste operatives to report. It's not their job. They're there to deal with what they're doing. They're asked around, whether it's, you know, whether it's recycling, whether they're doing blue bin or black bin or whatever, green bin. It's not their job. So we're down to obviously locals, like local people, obviously ward members, reporting on the council app. You must report it on the council app. People that have been, like myself before, care councillor, I reported for 2 years on the Fix My Street, but it's not linked to the Viola website. They're not linked. The system's not linked, so they never got it. So it ended up in a formal complaint because I obviously was very unhappy that for 2 years it took them 2 years to take some graffiti off a substation. So yeah, you must encourage everyone to use the app, please. Yeah, you know, and I encourage, you know, I've started right where I got done. It got painted again, all the green boxes. Yeah, and then you know, I put it out there with repainted, and then they've done it again. So you must encourage residents also to report these people if they see anything, take photos, use their cameras.
Yeah, well, we're diving down a rabbit hole here. It's just a quick update on the progress of the working group. Farzana, you were waving as well there, or indicating rather than waving, but very few people wave at me. I'm quite happy.
I know you should be really happy this evening then. Just to say, yes, we were at the same meeting, and the meeting took place in my ward. Yes, there was a discussion around whose responsibility is it. Just to clarify, I think really what was being said is that the clearing of it and dealing with it is the council's responsibility. But obviously, if the police see it happening, then there is an issue that they would need to be tackling. But the issue around tagging is about county lines and drug activity as well. And one of the key areas that a lot of residents are asking for is CCTVs in hotspots. And I think as a council, we need to consider how we go about making sure that key hotspots are.
So these graffiti tags are saying, what, this is my patch?
Yes.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and there's a lot of research and a lot of work that's been done on that to say that this is about county line activity. This is my patch. Come over to this patch. This is where you're able to get your resource, your drugs, basically. So we do need to treat it really seriously because it is also
but surely
increasing.
Then that comes back to the New York zero tolerance type approach, where when you deal with what looks like low-level graffiti, there's actually a bigger crime, a bigger criminal organisation at the end of that. Yeah. So by dealing with that, you
So that's really what I'm highlighting, that we need to treat it much more seriously than simple low-level antisocial behaviour.
Yeah. No, that's fine. Right. Well, we'll move on. I think our next meeting might be in January. I say might be because
because of the extraordinary council.
We've squeezed in an extra council meeting, and
we need to get a date.
We're going to have to set a new date, and that could be always. Anyway, we'll do that. But I think we're still on. We're still on that group is still on to meet its deadlines for January, February time. I can't remember when, but it's still working through. So, review of committee work plan, pages 25 to 30. Our next meeting is... Right, that's the formal meeting. But we will have the budget scrutiny meeting. Surely we're going to have something then around agreeing what it is we're going to scrutinise, or is that the...
Yes.
say
7th of Jan, right. So there'll be a number of offline or Teams type scrutiny reviews. So the budget, John will be launching the draft budget 22nd. Is that your Christmas present to West Northants? 22nd, that special cabinet meeting. So we'll have an opportunity then over a Christmas New Year break to decide, and then we'll meet on the 7th to probably break it down into, I would think, between 3, 4, 5 at the very most areas that we might want to give a greater scrutiny. Well, I suspect it'll be children's and then what else we want to do on top, but I won't prejudge that. And then we'll probably meet, is it middle of Feb? The dates are there, but it's just I don't want people to think we won't be meeting again between now and the 29th of January. We'll probably do most of our heavy lifting over the next 8 weeks.
Yeah. 14th of January, Chair, is when the group break into...
Right, so that's our breakout meeting, right. So 7th, 14th, 26th. Yeah, so those are the... And then we got the special council meeting. Well, there's plenty of other bits and pieces going on, so... But is there anything else then from the February meeting that members are going to have a burning desire to get on an agenda? Because January is going to be taken up with the budget. Probably, well, February, we'll be finished with the budget. John will be finalising it.
So after...
Yeah,
March. After 26th of January, the next committee meeting is the 18th of March.
It's March, yeah. Well, we'll probably be doing that 106 work, I suspect, then, in that kind of period between end of January and middle of March. I can't see us fitting it in. You know, and nothing gets in the way of the budget, so... Right. Silas.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. As we know, we introduced a risk-based approach. By the sounds of it, with the working group, it's already been decided that we're going to do this. I get that. We're probably never going to get to use it, or at least probably not for another 6 months.
No, cause, well, one of the things that I was very keen to do, when this will be for the group to decide, what are the risks around the 106? And there are some practical examples where we know, monies aren't coming through and risk of not being paid out and all sorts of things. So I don't think it's been, I think, your concern is just going to get filed away in a drawer called bright ideas and let it bin it off. But, it's not, I don't think that's anyone's intention.
Well, it sounds to me like when we first started, everybody was wanting to have their voice heard about what was going to be scrutinised, which was why I proposed a risk-based approach. But it sounds to me like you've already decided what you're going to scrutinise and when, and so the risk-based approach isn't going to be needed, which is fine. But I think that's all I have to say.
No, well, I'm more than happy to have a list of competing ideas. At the moment, we don't have them.
When will we have them?
Well, I keep asking, does anybody have anything that they want to put on the agenda?
Well, members' inquiries would be good, because I've heard various things in various meetings and I've experienced it myself. We put members' inquiries in and they get closed down, and we don't get asked if we're happy with the results, and we also don't get told that they're closed down, and so we're sat waiting, and only when we go back through our own millions of emails and check, do we realise actually nothing was done about it?
Yes.
So that would be a good thing to scrutinise.
Yeah. I was interested last night when we were doing that
etiquette meeting.
That topic, and I was talking out loud to myself when we got the thing. I can't remember if 76% were answered within the deadline that they set themselves, and I thought, do they keep any records as to how many were answered to the satisfaction of the member that asked the question? But I very much doubt that. But yeah, So that's an idea. We can put it on, and anything else that other members would like to shine a light on. Cal?
I thought that a risk-based approach was specifically for the period of the setting the work programme. And then that was the moment when we used that kind of stuff to say, okay, what we're going to do for the rest of the year. Oh, you know, so if we want to add additional topic, I don't see why we need to use the risk-based approach. It was very specifically, when it was introduced, it was very specific that this is how we would like to do that, which is fine.
Okay.
So which next time, when we have to consider the work programme and budget.
Well, through you, Chair, I put forward another idea, which I think your words were, we'll make a note of that, and we've had a discussion about that since, which is that we've got things written down in words, but we don't have any pictures. We don't have any diagrams. We talked about having Gantt charts to sort of show what it was that we were going to look at and when and by who, and we can now create a lovely Gantt chart, you know, once a month for the working groups that are going to be set up. But we don't have long-term planning visibility of what we're going to look at and when, so therefore the risk-based approach, there's no need for it because we don't know whether we're going to be overloaded, whether there's any gaps, and we've got no visual aids to show us what we're going to look at and when. It doesn't mean that the information isn't there, it is, but it's not in a visual format that is helpful to us. And I mentioned it at the last meeting, you said we'll note it, and I'm now wondering, well, what happens when something gets noted? Does that mean it gets completely forgotten about, or does it get brought up again?
My understanding, or maybe misunderstanding what you're saying, was around looking at what all of the scrutiny committees were doing to see was there an area that wasn't being looked at, as opposed to what we're looking at. But if you want to see this in a pictorial form, James, can that be agreed?
Okay, so just to clarify where I'm coming from, it doesn't matter whether it's this scrutiny panel, one of the other two, whether it's the triangulation group or all of them. You've only got a certain number of people, you've got a certain amount of things that you want to take a look at, you've got no visual aid to show you whether or not you've got too many people available and therefore you can afford to scrutinise them all, or whether you don't have enough and therefore you're not going to be able to scrutinise everything you want, or whether or not you're scrutinising too many things at the same time and then you'll end up with a gap where nothing's being scrutinised. You've got no visual aid, and we all probably know Gantt charts from project management, etc. It wouldn't be difficult to transpose those three planning groups, or even just this one, into a visual aid so that we can see, have we got enough resources to do the task? Can we afford to look at more things? Does that all make sense now?
Can you sort something out, James?
It makes sense. I mean, what Councillor Hayes is talking about is what the position that scrutiny would always seem to be in, which is making best use, knowing what its available resources are and making best use of them, not taking on too much. I think there would need to be a further discussion across the scrutiny function about how work programmes were set out in future. I mean, Councillor Hayes is strongly advocating for a more visual approach than is currently taken. I don't think it would be appropriate for this committee unilaterally to decide it was going to set out its work programme in a certain way, because then it would be varying from essentially what's the corporate approach to setting out scrutiny work programmes. That doesn't mean that there couldn't be a discussion about how scrutiny work programmes are best set out. I think that would be a matter for the triangulation group.
Chair,
well, I would endeavour to try and get something sorted.
Chair, I was just going to say, I think that's the point I would make. That's up to the chairs of the committees through that triangulation group, and maybe that's where the discussion needs to take place.
Okay, Dan?
Sorry, it was about proposing a different item for the agenda. If we're in, can we propose? We've got some concerns specifically in our group around the function of the planning service, particularly performance, process efficiency, customer experience. Can we propose it as a work item on the agenda to review those particular things from a governance perspective and see what we can do to help improve the planning service?
He's trying to wind me up now. Well, I'm not going to say anything on that, because no matter what I say, people will say, well, there he goes again. So what's the committee's view on that?
I think there are some issues to explore. I think it's a question of when and how it fits into the work plan we've already got, because we know that the budget work is going to take priority, but I think it's definitely something that's worth exploring.
Dan?
I think we're already it's already been taken care through the democracy committee. Don't we looking at the planning processes, etc.?
Sorry, the
That's right.
democracy and standards will be looking at the planning protocol part of the constitution as part of its review. I think what Dan's proposing is more about a critique as to how efficient we find them, how.
But how is it? Isn't it linked? It is linked.
They are linked, yeah, without a doubt, they are linked. But there's nothing to stop one and trying to feed or inform the other. Adrian?
You need to put your microphone on, Adrian, and make sure you're within the teardrop.
That's fine, yeah, ours has run out, it's been used that much. Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think the more eyes on this from the more angles, the better, I feel.
Okay.
Thank you.
Silas?
So just to finish off the discussion we were having before Councillor Lister's point, I'd be happy to work with James to create a visual aid to take to the triangulation group so that the visual aid can be seen in all of its glory, so that you can make a better informed choice. And on to Councillor Lister's point, I think that all of the proposed amendments put forward with regards to planning need to be properly looked at by the working group that has been created by the Democracy and Standards Working Group, and for the constitutional changes to be in effect and see if they're working before we then scrutinise, because what's the point in scrutinising something at the moment when it's possibly about to change?
I think that's only one small aspect as to what comes to committee, which is, well, less than 10%. And how the committee aspect of planning, I think sorry, I'm not putting words in Dan's mouth, I think what Dan wants is much more of a root and branch bonnet up what's going on inside this department kind of review. But maybe and if I'm misunderstanding it, let me know. And if you think I'm putting my own prejudice on it, let me know as well. I'm trying not to. Well, look, everybody knows that my view on planning is pretty well known. So, and I have to chair this without saying, oh yeah, that sounds like a cracking idea. But it's whatever the committee wishes to do, not what I wish to do or would like to see done.
Can I make a proposal? Are we still utilising, if we're utilising the scrutiny proposal document, whether it's the new version or the old version, then I would ask if Dan maybe could make that proposal and circulate it.
And look at the risk reward as well. Director for planning.
Sorry, and again, it's getting to the point where we'll have to rename this scrutiny planning and resources with planning at the front. Again, we've got section 106 in line. We've said that we look at that particular department and those particular issues over the next 6 months or so. It feels to me that, and what I'm more than happy to do, is give a full presentation of my directorate, because it does feel as if there is a bit of a scrambling around for what can we put on the agenda, rather than, if I can point to Councillor Hayes' suggestion, we do a risk-based. We've got flooding, we've got transport, we've got waste, we've got assets, we've got finance and all of the corporate services. We've got housing. The list of risks and priorities is huge. And what I continually hear is, and again, from members, which I take seriously, is let's look at planning, let's look at planning. Sorry, there is 100 things that I could suggest that as a scrutiny group you can really add value to, etc. And planning is one of those things. But again, I think to do that in the round and with a full understanding of all of the topic areas where legislative change is coming forward, where, again, the links to finance, because as a council, we've just heard we're really challenged and really struggling there. So again, assets would be another good area to look at, and how are we maximising our impact in terms of the use of assets, etc., etc. So again, sorry, I'm not saying don't do planning. If you please fill your next 2 years of planning, if that's what you want. I'm sure my other services would appreciate that. However, equally, I think what I'll say there, Chair, is more than happy to do a help and assistance to members to go through some of the areas that could be alternatives to that.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, and it also ties in with what Silas is saying in terms of the risk as to where you get your best bang for your buck. And we did say when we looked at the 106, because I think there was a suggestion to do planning in general, and I said, well, that's maybe we need to digest the elephant in bite-sized chunks, as opposed. So we wanted to look at the 106 area as opposed to just planning, because you could easily break that down to enforcement, policy. You know, you could, and it would be probably add more value to actually say, can we look at the functioning of planning enforcement, or planning policy making, or planning development management, and the role of members in the planning system, as opposed to just that big one-word planning that covers everything and anything that you want. So that might be more helpful, and then balancing it off against some of the things, you know, flooding. I know if Sally were here, she'd probably jump in on that. You know, some of the other things, you know, asset disposals, IT. You know, if you're looking at risks, there's things there. We had an email today from Martin about cyber risk. There's other risks where we're disentangling, or untangling ourselves from the old county arrangement between north and west, and splitting that, and there's a massive business as usual risk there, setting aside the financial.
Yeah, Chair, if I may, I think Stuart's right. I think, having said that, though, I still think it would be worth Dan, if it's an issues that are being discussed and raised, putting together a proposal. And then the committee can have a look at that, because that might narrow it down potentially.
So if we can have a quick 10-15 minutes from overview of what you've got and some idea then as to where we're at, that might actually throw up other ideas then about things that we want to look at, because we may find that members' inquiries is interesting because it's the only thing that interests us, but actually, you know, there's a possibility of not being able to pay benefits to people because if somebody hacks our security systems, which is a greater problem when you can't get cash to people that need it. And
personally, I think assets definitely.
Yeah, well, okay. Well,
through you, Chair, again, would that overview be at the committee meeting on the 18th of March on the basis that 26th of January is devoted to budget scrutiny?
I think by default it'll almost have to be, unfortunately. But in the meantime, Dan, feel free to pitch ideas, and we can circulate them informally amongst ourselves. And I don't mind having a quick 5 minutes during one of those budget sessions to update people. But we, you know, once we get into it, we won't have a lot of time for anything else. Stuart?
And just to facilitate that, more than happy to do, again, I'll use the term pictorial sort of view, just a quick diagram, if you like, of all the services, what the key risks are in each of the services. I could circulate that quite quickly, certainly in advance of your 7th of, was it 7th of January? Yeah.
Yeah.
If that's helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. What worries me about this is a lot of time is going to pass, and if we wait until March before we sit and have another session like this, we'll talk about it generally. It feels to me like we need a working group with key members of each of the scrutiny panels, and maybe one or two people that goes to the triangulation group that aren't at the scrutiny panels, to have all of the lists in front of them and do the work for a day or half a day to go through the risk-based approach. And arrive at March with some kind of numbering system as to what we think the results are.
What's the next meeting, the triangulation group?
Next meeting of the triangulation group is likely to be late February or early March,
Okay,
because
no,
it was
it's
originally in January and was put back to avoid.
Yeah.
So the working group would need to sit before that.
Okay, well, let's do it with the triangulation group with the other chairs. So that's getting, in effect, three, four, five of us in a room. I'm more than happy to do that. Throw in a whole load of ideas for the melting pot. Not a problem.
So my proposal is 2 or 3 people from each scrutiny panel and maybe 1 or 2 others to go through the whole proposed workload, do the risk-based approach, and then take it to the triangulation group. And I'm happy to come along as a facilitator of the risk-based approach, rather than somebody who sits on a scrutiny panel, just to make sure that the process is standardised.
I'm happy enough for that.
So Councillor Hayes, are you talking about go through the work programmes of each of the scrutiny committees and reach a collective priority order?
Well, the triangulation group would benefit from understanding which of the scrutiny panels' highest risks are and looking at it from a totality perspective, because you could have one scrutiny panel that's got 5 or 6 things that it wants to look at that have scored more highly than the other 2 put together. That's a possibility. So, having done that work, I think, and having a pictorial view of, one risk matrix with all of the dots of all of the things that we want to look at and where they sit in the matrix would really help. Certainly the triangulation group to make some decisions.
I think, Chair, formally, this committee could kind of extend an invitation to the other 2 to participate in that. This committee couldn't agree it would all happen because this committee isn't sovereign over the other 2.
Yeah, I was going to make the same point, but you've done it much more eloquently.
I'll paint a picture. I'd facilitate. You could have each of the scrutiny panels having a corner of the room, asking them to look at all of the proposed things that they want to scrutinise, using the risk-based approach and coming up with their own priorities, and then pulling it all together into one single proposal. If that helps you picture how we would do it, then that's how we would do it. And it would be a fun day, trust me.
Chair, if I may, though, that's why we have chairs. I don't know why we have chairs.
I don't doubt that. The only issue, as James was pointing out, is it could be just you and me in the room. If the other, and that would be an even more fun day. But well, fun for one of us. As James said, we could not tell children's and adults, you must be there because Silas and Ian are going to have a fun day.
I'm going to turn my microphone off now. I hope that you've got something to think about.
Yeah, no, I will certainly write to the other chairs and ask them to do that and come up with a couple of volunteers. Because I think in essence, it's a good idea that we could look at that workload. It is what the triangulation committee's got to do. Anything that we could do to help that, fine. I'm more than happy to try and ply a way through. Right, so I think we're at the end. There is no urgent business. And I will close the meeting at 19:53. Thank you all for coming. I'm sure I will see people before Christmas, but if not, Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
Tomorrow?
Tomorrow, yeah.
Oh, God, yeah. Well, I was going to say we mightn't see Nadia, but she'll definitely be there.